Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast about the A-Leagues, Premier League and more. This week, the Officer's David Brent makes an appearance in English non-league football. South Melbourne Mike exposes himself to Lisa Devanna. Mayhem in Al Gran Derby. And hashtag transfer chat, including Everton's latest shit show. My name's Tommie C, and joining me on the pod this week, Jesse. How are you, mate?
Mate, I'm good, and it's a pleasure to be back. Since I've gone away, there's probably been more postponements, cancellations than actual football in the A-League. But I can assure you that one thing's happened, and that's the return of Trent Bahagia. So, I go away and he starts to turn good. So, not a coincidence, I think.
Well, mate, we're going to have to talk about that because I'm still not convinced that Trent Bahaj is good. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later, though. Mate, let's hook straight into moment of the week, though. What do you got straight up?
Well, one of them is going to be covered very shortly as a very colourful interview. A lot of people said that if I was a manager, potentially that's how I'd handle my press gallery.
That's a good shout.
I can't argue with that. I think it's just hilarious. Some of the mind games in that interview is fantastic. Another one that we'll probably cover as well is the Ward-Prowse free kick, which was just absolutely sensational. I just haven't seen a person have it go like that for quite a while. So that was a special moment.
Colby and I, we're not always super prepared or super tech savvy when it comes to being able to insert the audio clip straight into the show. But look, we've got a treat for everyone this week. We're going to be able to play both of those clips, the James Ward-Prowse commentary and also the David Brent in English non-league football. So, Jesse, which one would you like first?
Well, one more shout has to go to Phoenix woman Alyssa Wynnum with a cracking goal. I believe it's her first goal, senior goal. So absolute moment. If you haven't seen the clip, I'm assuming it's probably on Keep Up or on Paramount Plus or one of those platforms. But basically, she just melts down after she's scored and just can't believe what has just happened. So it's warms the heart, Tommy, when you see that stuff happen.
It was really nice. Yeah, you sent that around in the group chat today, Jesse, and I really liked it. It definitely it was a heartwarming moment. Love to see it.
Love to see it.
All right, let's play this interview that we were talking about. So this is from Aldershot Town. They're from the first level below League Two, so the fifth tier of English football. And this is I think it's a pre-game interview, isn't it? Jesse, yeah.
I think so. I'm not 100% sure. I just enjoy the clip.
All right, here goes.
FA Trophy tie at home against Bromley this weekend. What's your thoughts ahead of the game?
If a tree falls and no one is there to hear it fall, does it make a noise? So, does a penguin get cold? What way does your bath water go? Clockwise or anti-clockwise when you take the plug out? These are questions which are going to be asked of us. These are questions we've got to have the answers to. We're always looking for solutions and we've got to come up with solve the equation sometimes. But, Sam's had a lovely haircut. It's started to grow out now. Coops is here, working silently away. Robbie's over there. It's the first time he's been quiet today. Terry's brought a briefcase in, He's got 4 Japanese talking dogs in there. But, this is what we work with and we'll continue to work hard.
Oh, Lord.
I mean, you can't argue with that. You can't argue with that.
It's just spectacular, isn't it? Like, I shared that on the More Than a Game Twitter account with just like the gif of David Brent when he just looks from the interviewer back to the camera and then back to the interviewer. And oh my Lord, it's just David Brent. It's just concentrated David Brent. It's classic.
That is.
Oh my Lord. Sam brought a briefcase in.
4 Japanese dogs in it.
Oh Lord! All right, now another great piece of content we've got this week was also the response to James Ward-Prowse's free kick against Wolves, and this as well is pretty well standalone, right? I think everyone has probably seen the free kick by now, but here it goes.
Again, I think this is just a little bit too far out for Ward-Prowse. For me, this should be a little angle for Perot. very difficult to put anything on that. You have to take the weight off the ball to start off with. Can't put too much on it because it'll just go out of play. Unless, of course, he fancies it from
Well,
there.
I was about to say, Jose Sarr said, look, make sure there's at least 2 in the wall because he might actually have a crack here at this late stage. Which he did! Oh,
Seems.
what a goal! What an astounding free kick!
Oh, wow.
So good. So good.
It's just such a perfect moment of the commentator just having a big slice of humble pie, and especially because he bangs on for so long saying, "Oh yeah, this is how I would do it," and it's just he gets absolutely shown up. It's fantastic.
I mean, for new listeners, if you haven't heard before, my wife's Portuguese. We watched the Euros. When they won the Euros, I was in Portugal, and when we watched the replay back in the BBC version or the English version, it had Martin Tyler was one of the commentators, and he's like, it's come to Ed Air. He's like, looking for some help. He doesn't need any help when he scored the goal, and my wife still quotes it to this day.
Oh, very
It's
good.
just one of those like iconic sort of moments where the commentator was convinced that there's no way he could take a shot from out there, and obviously the rest is history. So it is very satisfying when the commentators kind of have the egg on their face, and then they have to get excited to overcompensate.
Even the co-commentator, even he tried to rev himself up a little bit, but just wasn't quite. I think it's is it Joe Spate? I think it is, he's the guy who gets really excited, and I actually think he's a really underrated commentator, but doesn't get some of the
Goal Rush.
Yeah, Goal Rush King. All right. In terms of my moment of the week, though, it was hard to go past that Aldershot Town interview. That was going to be mine as well. But look, very quickly, shout out for Josh Cavallo. He's had a bit of a rough week / fortnight with I guess the incident involving Melbourne Military fans recently. But look, he's ultimately come out on top, maybe, and he's had the last laugh. This week was announced that he's going to be. He secured a global Ralph Lauren sponsorship deal, so good on him. And so he's going to be laughing all the way to the bank now. I think at least this week and into later this year. So good on him, stylish young man.
Yeah, good on him.
Own goals, Jesse. You got any?
So this is an interesting one because I was finding it difficult to find anything this week. There's so many great moments. I mean, I didn't even talk about my boy Coutinho's return to the Premier League. We'll talk about him later. But on the own goal side of things, it's the word postponement not being used and the word cancellation being used instead of postponement. It really grinds my gears, Tommie. And I'm just noticing that it's first there's the COVID-19 pandemic, and now there's the cancellation. You can call it cancellation culture, cancel culture, whatever you want to call it. But we're now in a situation where people are misusing the word cancellation instead of postponement, and it's starting to really get to me, as you can tell. I mean, like these Premier League games that are cancelled, they're not cancelled. They're going to get postponed. They're going to get played. But the media and everybody involved are just saying they're cancelled, and basically we're getting to a point where the word postponed is just getting thrown out the door. It's basically won't even exist anymore soon because cancellation has surpassed it, according to most people.
You're saying that postponements are getting cancelled?
Yeah, that's exactly that is exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, look, details matter in the world. We're big exponents of that, and so yeah.
Well,
mate,
the game is going to happen. That's my point. Like, it's cancelled. The game's never going to happen. It is going to happen.
Man,
it's just going to.
I know it's going to be okay.
The A-League hasn't been cancelled, all right?
Oh, I feel like half the listeners would switch off if they were like, "Oh, the A-League's cancelled. Oh, well, I'm not going to bother with this."
I tell you what, I could be cancelled after this.
Nah, you're all right. You're all right. But look, as far as I go for an own goal this week, it was I've got two. The first one was really quick. Involved the Seville derby or the El Grand Derby. You talk about superfluous words or butchering of the English language using the El Clasico or the El Grand Derby, and I just did it myself. In the El Grand Derby between Sevilla and Real Betis, Real Betis scored a goal. Jordan, he scored a goal, which I think was the equaliser, or it was one goal to beg them back from a 2-0 loss or 2-0 scoreline. And one of the Sevilla fans, I think, has thrown a pole and hit him in the head. And the game ended up getting abandoned. Again, words are important. And they abandoned the game, and I think I think at the end they ended up giving the match to Real Betis, basically because the match was abandoned. So that's pretty grim. The other thing though, and this is back in Australia, was to do with the what is it called? The Liberty A-League women competition. Perth Glory were hosting a game out in WA this week, and Michael Caine of not the one from the Batman trilogy, this one, the journalist from Mark Viduka interview fame, he tweeted about how he was at the game and he counted 208 people, and it got me wondering: is that the real South Melbourne Mike? Is Michael Caine really South Melbourne Mike? It just goes to A-League games, just counting the number of people there. But look, the real own goal in this was this could almost be a moment of the week, was Lisa Devanna's reply, which was, Michael, take this shit tweet off. Fine, you respect me, but you're talking about my Glory teammates here, and some of these girls playing in the league are still kids, and I won't allow you to shit talk them publicly, which I thought was just, you can hear that in Lisa Devanna's voice, right? But just, I love the way that she just passionately defended her girls, her team, and obviously as well, right? Like even like the A-League is the A-League men is struggling for fans in grounds at the moment. So we know that a lot of this is down to the pandemic and people pointing out that there's not a lot of people at games at the moment. Pretty much in any sport in Australia is pretty counterproductive. So
yeah. I mean, I understand like how we have to talk about it sometimes, in the sense that, you know, there's a problem across many codes with engagement and crowds turning up. But as you say, it's not helpful if you just literally just criticize it and you don't have anything else, any other value to add. It's just, It can be disrespectful, as you can see with the fiery reply.
And look, Lisa Devanna, she's bang on the money as well, right? Like these are kids that are playing at like a professional level, or and then trying their best to sort of break through to the next level. And it's just not ideal that there's someone there just basically slamming him. It did come to mind though that you know, the Wire quote of like, if you come for the Queen, you best not miss. And Lisa Devanna did not miss.
No, certainly didn't.
All right, a couple of news points from this week though, and I think they're all transfer related. So I guess we'll call this transfer chat. First one, Jesse, big one for you. Chris Wood to Newcastle. Damo asks, is Chris Wood to Newcastle the biggest New Zealand transfer of all time?
I think it has to be up there. I mean, I think that we all still remember Ryan Nelson for Blackburn, I believe. He was there for quite some time. So I think, and he was followed pretty closely back in New Zealand when he was moving around the Premier League. But I think maybe considering this, what's about to happen with Newcastle, I mean, I think we all sort of know that Wood's probably not going to be in the plans once they actually start building a really, really strong team. But
could be a great striker for him in the Championship next season.
Well, there's that, but there's also the sense that even if they do stay up, it's like, if you're him, why would you care? Like, why would you care about playing for Newcastle in 6 or 8 years from now, whenever they become a superpower? When right now you can be part of the team that builds some a bit of a legacy, and whether or not that be, you know, yo-yoing back up from the Championship or not. Where was he going at Burnley? Like he just done everything he could at that club, and the game plan was never going to change, and it was just kind of like, I think he'd gone a bit stale. So I mean, I'm personally stoked for him. I think it's
you Burnley for him, or you stoked for him?
Well, on a cold and wet, windy night, I'm definitely stoked for him. But I have to say, you know, I think it's important to separate him from Newcastle's dog move and buying him, because
cheeky, isn't it?
They met his buyout clause. So
Mm.
if you're Chris Wood, obviously you're happy days. But a lot of people, I think, a little bit of mixed emotions on Twitter, maybe more so from Burnley fans who are sort of having a go. And it's like, basically they put a buyout clause there going, Barcelona, Real Madrid, if you come calling to Chris Wood, you're not going to get him because, we've got this much money. And then, of course, they didn't expect someone like Newcastle, like a relegation rival, to have that change in their pockets. So, yeah, it's just an unfortunate set of events for Burnley Football Club, I think.
I think they've come out of it pretty well, though. I mean, you should be able to find a $20 million striker that at least is going to make you as competitive as Chris Wood. I mean, I'm sure they would have been doing their scouting anyway because they've got new owners, and I think they've got some money to spend as well. So the fact that now that they pretty much have to go out and buy someone just, I guess, makes that a little bit more urgent, though.
Mm.
Other transfers, Luca Digne has gone from Aston Villa, to Aston Villa from Everton. This strikes me as just like Agent Rafa, just further just taking out all of the goodness from Everton and just basically trying to get rid of it. In fact, he's even sold him to former Liverpool legend Stevie Gerrard. So it's just.
The conspiracy theorists, it's out of control at the moment. I mean, it's spicy, don't get me wrong, but I think if you the interesting thing about Digne is, according to some of the rumors, at least even from some of the stuff that Fabrizio said as well, he didn't want to go to Newcastle. So Newcastle were interested, but he didn't want to go. So he chose, when the offer came on the table, he wanted to go to Villa. So how much say Everton seemed to have in the matter, I don't know, because he clearly wasn't playing in the first team anymore. But what a signing for Villa, because, I mean, he might not be, I don't think he's the world's greatest defender, but he's incredibly astute going forward, and his crossing is sensational. And I was just saying to you guys offline when we were talking about it earlier in the week that one really underrated thing about the signing is that, obviously most people expect him just to replace Target like he did on the weekend, but they can also play different formations now because Target's perfectly competent at left back. So you can actually have a Digne, if you want, playing more progressively in like a 3-4-3 or something like that. So he can play essentially as a pressing midfielder. And I mean, you look around the league and you see Cancelo and Trent starting to play like that. And I'm sure Villa have their own plans about how they want to use their fullbacks. So now they've actually got the chance of using him really progressively, and he wouldn't have got that opportunity at Rafa's Everton, at least.
Mate, maybe there's a player that I know you're a big fan of, and I don't know if this comparison is taking things too far, but would you say that he's basically Aston Villa's Matt Ritchie now?
I'd say that the dream for me would actually be to have Luca Digne and Kieran Trippier on the same side of the field. Both hugging that left-hand touchline. That would be an absolute dream.
Rest in peace, Colby List. Sorry, mate.
Absolutely.
I didn't bring it up.
Banter.
Next up in transfer chat with Riley McGree. Now, we mentioned this last week that he was linked with Celtic. He ended up rejecting Celtic because he was offered more money, and Charlotte offered more money by Middlesbrough. So Chris Wilder's Middlesbrough came with more money for Riley McGree, and so he's going to be back in the Championship shortly. Great move, I think, for Riley McGree. Both either Celtic or Borough, I think, we're going to be great moves for him in Chris Wilder and Ange Postecoglou. We're going to be great managers, I think, for him. But the fact that Borough are sort of thereabouts in the playoffs in the Championship at the moment mean that, I mean, it's very possible that we could be seeing Riley McGree back in the Premier League next year, which would be just fantastic. I think having Aussies back in the Premier League after a bit of a dry spell over the last couple of years. It's probably about time that we talk about probably the big one and probably the most unexpected of all of the transfers, though, and it was Philippe Coutinho to Aston Villa. Did you see this happening, Jesse?
I didn't. I think that most of the links was him going back to or going to Newcastle, or potentially Arsenal were interested as well. But I couldn't really see in those setups, I mean, maybe Newcastle, but I couldn't really see where he was going to be the main man. And I think that one of the things I said to you guys during the week is that he needs to be the main man, or at least at the center of the play. Like, he wants the ball a lot. He wants to be given the opportunity to dictate play. And he couldn't do that obviously at Barca. And I mean, he had one of the few times he had opportunity to do that at Bayern. They absolutely ripped Spurs to shreds, if you recall. And he had a cracking game. I think he scored a hat-trick or something, but he is one of those players where, I mean, when he's down on confidence, he's invisible, but when he's on, he's on. And I was actually, he even surprised me as a long-term big fan of him. He surprised me how well he played last night with against Manchester United. He came on and he just made an immediate impact.
And that's a good segue into my question about the Coutinho transfer, is that obviously he was on fire in that game against Man United. He got an assist and a goal after coming on midway through the second half. Do you think that's just the beginning of Coutinho's sort of spell, or do you think that's a bit more of a Di Maria moment, where, if you remember, Di Maria had like that magical little chip goal, I think, against Leicester, and then really like he didn't do anything else after that. So, do you think it's just the beginning, or you think this is just one of his one and only highlight of his time?
I think there's more for him to give. I think that the difference between the Di Maria, I mean, the person I would compare him to is Hummus. When Hummus came in and immediately looked really good that first few weeks for Everton, and then just obviously, I mean, injuries and that sort of thing. But you could question at times his motivation, whereas I guess that's the question with Coutinho, is he looks like he's motivated. That performance last night looked like he was motivated. He looked hungry to get on the ball. And if Gerrard can get him motivated, which he looks like it already has, then I think he will surpass sort of how Di Maria and Hummus adjusted to the league. And I think he knows that this is his last sort of chance, probably in this division. And I think last night's performance indicated that he's going to try and play as well as he can.
We saw last year with Lingard going to West Ham how a player that hasn't been playing that much can come in mid-year, and because they're so fresh and they're so, I think in both these cases they're super motivated, they can come in and they can play at an intensity and sustained intensity for a couple of weeks. Whereas a lot of players by this point of the season, they're not quite on fumes yet, but they're definitely feeling a little bit fatigued from what is a long season, and they're only halfway through it. So. Maybe this is just the beginning of much more magic from Philippe.
I agree.
Finally, this I guess is a little bit of transfer chat, but Rafa Benitez was sacked overnight from Everton after Everton lost 2-1 against relegation embattled Norwich City. I don't think anyone is really particularly surprised at Rafa getting the sack. I mean, Everton's performances and results in the last probably 4 or 5 months, pretty much since the first month of the season, have been absolutely woeful, despite really struggling with injuries. It's rumoured that they were rejected subsequently by Jose Mourinho. I think he's well and truly entrenched at Roma at the moment, only just arrived there. But Roberto Martinez and Wayne Rooney, Rino Gattuso have all been linked with the vacant Everton job. What an absolute, and excuse the language, shit show, because there's no other word to describe this whole Everton situation, really, is there?
There's just no planning. I mean, we've massacred Man United at times about their lack of foresight. I mean, Everton's it's just diabolical. I think the thing with this one is that I find sometimes when a business, and I mean, let's face it, these football clubs are businesses. I find it sometimes when a business makes a really poor judgment error or repeatedly makes mistakes, you just kind of think to yourself, no, you can't be that stupid, or you can't have such a poor PR team, or you can't have such a shit HR department. But in this case with Everton, when they signed Rafa, anybody you spoke to who knows an ounce about football would be like, that's not going to work. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, because of the Merseyside rivalry, but secondly, because, I mean, what really is he going to bring to that team that is different to what Ancelotti was trying to do and that sort of thing? Like, it's just, they need something else. They need like a belief and a system and a sort of an ethos to build around. They don't have that. Instead, they went back to playing sort of protective football. And it's not a surprise that the same players who started to feel a little bit uninspired from the previous managers about the same style of football became uninspired by the same kind of football. On top of that, with injuries, I don't think you can blame Rafa for the injuries, but he was in a hiding to nothing. I mean, we talked about it on the pod when he got hired. I'm like, we were all taking bets on how long he's going to last, and here we are. I mean, I'm sort of a little bit more in disbelief that this has happened, because as a Liverpool fan, I'm like, it's just such a shame that he he took the job in the first place. I mean, I would love to just rewind and don't take that job. It's never going to end well, and certainly it didn't.
I think you're that sense of disbelief is one that I can definitely share in as well. It just seems weird that it was bizarre that he got appointed in the first place, and now, I mean, they made that decision. They brought him in. They had to commit to it as well. And one of the problems that they've had there is that they've had so many different managers, so many different styles, and each manager has also had their major impact on the shape of the squad. And Rafa Benitez, he got out a bunch of personalities that he didn't like. He didn't get along with James, he didn't get along with Dina, and I think it's rumored even that Alan is meant to be leaving and going back to Italy. There's a few other players. He'd signed Anwar Al Ghazi as well from Villa. It's probably a bit of a make weight for the Dina deal, but now someone else has got to come in and say, oh well, this squad that's been kind of gutted by Rafa, because most of it was because of players just signed on exorbitant wages, but now there's this really thin squad, and some new manager's got to come in and try and make something happen with a really threadbare squad. It's just really, really strange.
Yeah, no, they're just their transfers, regardless of managers, their transfers over time has been so poor that each manager's inherited problems. And now the management side of things has become the biggest problem. So I just think that if you go into Everton now, it's a matter of where do you start? Unfortunately,
2 points on those linked managers. So Roberto Martinez, he's been mostly he was unemployed for a long while, but he's been the manager of the Belgian national team. He hasn't had a club job since leaving Everton. It was 6 years ago. But I guess Wayne Rooney is the most interesting linked manager, given that. So he's at Derby at the moment, and he's got a team that's really struggling financially. I think they've got a 12-point penalty, and they're almost out of the relegation zone, despite the season only being halfway through. They couldn't sign any players because they didn't have any money, and they're a bit of a basket case. But Wayne Rooney seems to be doing pretty well there. So him being linked with a Premier League club is pretty massive. So it'd be interesting to see if he does end up coming to the Premier League, how he goes, because I tell you what, Wayne Rooney is not a person who I would have looked at 5 years ago and thought, I think he'll be a success as a manager. Nope.
He's doing good things.
All right, let's get into some A-League though. So A-League, Isuzu Utes A-League men's round 10 again has been absolutely hammered by postponements. I was going to say cancellations, COVID cancellations, but no, still got it fresh in the mind, Jesse. Further postponements has meant that some teams have played 8 games and some teams have only played 4. Jesse, is this the most perverted season so far after the split season when COVID first interrupted the season, and then also last year's sort of condensed season? Is it?
Well, I mean, if you say perverted in the sense that you're looking through a number of windows in a neighborhood, and the people that have sort of cottoned onto you looking through have closed their curtains, but the rest keep the lights on, then yeah, I guess if you're using that analogy, it is kind of perverted. But I think it's more the fact that
perverted, like people counting the number of fans at games, like that?
Binoculars, counting the amount of fans, that sort of schadenfreude. I think with the A-League at the moment is that I said to you before, it is a bit of a mess. I mean, we have to embrace it for what it is. We're doing the same thing with other leagues like the Premier League, but and hopefully, I mean, we've all got our fingers crossed that once this kind of this wave goes through, that provided that players can recover okay, we may have more of a consistent second part of the season. But it has been incredibly disruptive. And I guess, for me, particularly, I've been going away overseas for 3 weeks, coming back. I haven't actually missed that much football. I thought I'd missed so many games. And I was whipping through a lot of games in the last week or so to really catch myself up on the local games. And I hadn't actually missed as many as I thought. And it's just testament to how many were postponed. Almost caught myself there. How many were postponed over Christmas? I think you guys were talking about it between Christmas and New Year. There was a huge amount of them that just didn't go ahead.
There was, and it does mean that I think Perth Glory announced today that they're good to go for their next scheduled match. So it'll be great for them because I think I read today that it's been 60 days since Dennis Sturridge made his debut. How wild is that?
Yeah.
But look, speaking of wild things, one of the matches that was actually played this weekend was Adelaide hosting Melbourne City. This was your classic A-League game so it had 4 goals, a red card, a goalkeeping error, a penalty saved, and a late comeback.
And the A-League Anfield absolutely rocking.
I've never heard it called that before.
Oh, we've been really pushing for that in the previous pods. Yeah, red team, Adelaide, the A-League Anfield. I mean, we're just hoping it takes off.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Adelaide Anfield. Yeah, all right. Question for you: the Craig Goodwin penalty. Describe your response to Goodwin's penalty being saved.
Well, first of all, I feel like I could hear like a shriek outside, sort of coming across from the northern suburbs, and I realized it was probably Damo watching his boy not convert. He was probably devastated about that. First of all, I mean, am I the only one that's sort of a bit surprised that he was on penalties? Have other players taken penalties over Craig Goodwin in the past? I mean, I'm not so in touch with my Adelaide first 11, but it seemed to surprise me a little bit that he was taking them.
I think Isaias maybe had already been substituted by this point in the game, and George Blackwood, the Adelaide striker, he'd also been substituted too. So I think Craig Goodwin might be first choice penalty taker anyway. But definitely if Isaias and Goodwin's not Goodwin, Blackwood isn't on the pitch, it's probably pretty clear that he would end up taking it. But in terms of responses, though, with him doing the little studded run up, which we talked about, it was the last week or 2 weeks ago on the pod, and how I hate it. I tell you what, I was a very satisfied man when that penalty ended up getting saved, and so yeah, it was. Is it Schadenfreude? Is that how you say it, Jesse? Your German's quite good.
A good win becomes a bad miss.
Yep, it was as far as I was concerned, it was a good miss. And look, credit where credit's due. And you probably can't say that a hell of a lot this year, but Tom Glover, I thought it was a decent penalty save. I mean, you still got to pick the right way to go. You've still got to either stop it or make sure that you at least sort of bat it away from the penalty taker or any on-rushing attackers. So credit where credit's due to Tom Glover for actually making the save as well. But look, Tom Glover wasn't, in the greatest of form in this game. He was arguably at fault for Adelaide's first goal prior to the penalty, which gave them a foothold in the match. And I think there's been a little bit of a call in the last couple of weeks for Tom Glover to maybe take a rest. He's a bit of a young player, and whilst he's shown that he could be a Socceroos goalkeeper maybe in the future, he's having a bit of a form dip at the moment. So do you think he's due for a rest, or do you think he should just play on through?
It's tough to know with goalkeepers because it's such a mental thing, and once they get taken out for a game, it can actually do more damage than in pushing through. I actually thought that. I mean, I only saw snippets of it, but there were moments where he looked like he actually did pretty well. So there's obviously good signs there. It's just sometimes maybe it can be actually just lapses in concentration, which, as painful as it is to watch as a viewer, I'm pretty sure goalkeeping coaches actually prefer that, because that's something that you can quite quickly address if it's a lapse in concentration, as opposed to just poor technique. It didn't look like his technique was too poor, but having said that, I had to catch up with 3.5 weeks of A-League, so I haven't seen if he has been really off the boil. Please get in the comments and at me.
Well, I think you have actually summarised it quite well about that. It's most likely down to lapses in concentration more than anything. And so, look, I think it's a tough call, and City don't have an experienced senior goalkeeper as backup to Tom Glover. They've got another young goalkeeper. I think it's Matt's his first name, but Sutton's definitely his surname. And he hasn't played a lot of A-League games. So it's not like they can bring in an experienced backup and say, all right, well, look, you maybe not quite at the level of Tom Glover, but you've been there, you know the A-League well. So tough for Sutton to come in, I think.
Mm.
George Blackwood, he was on the scene for to make the most of Tom Glover's error that I was referring to just before. But I tell you what, it was not a glamorous goal though. He absolutely shinned it, and I think it came off a defender, and then basically he just kneed it in. Wasn't even trying to get it in. Does this guy ever score legit goals or just scuffed like efforts?
I mean, you'd have to go back through the catalogue to pick out all those most beautiful goals that he's scored in his career.
There's not many of them. There's not many of them.
It reminded me a little bit of Grealish's first goal for City, where it just came off his thigh or something, and it was just like everyone was happy, obviously, but it was just very anticlimactic.
Very similar.
Yeah.
Mate, one player who's been copying a hiding recently for City has been Matthew Leckie. But he actually set up Andrew Naboo's goal. And Smithy, he asks, will Leckie play again this season, or will he take the Vince Grella route to retirement, which is basically just sort of fading into the sunset?
I think he will play again this season, and it'll be for the Roos. Just got to throw that out there.
Remember my bold prediction was that he would play up front with Naboo and McLaren against Vietnam in Melbourne for the Socceroos. Yeah. How's that going?
I mean, I think the funny thing is when players like this, when they get really heavily criticized, it's hard to sort of see this as a positive, but it does actually reflect that people have high expectations of him. So, I mean, if he's been playing really, really poorly, which obviously he has at times, it's kind of like everyone expects him to do better. He probably knows he can do better. The coaches will know he can do better. So the only way up really from here is up. I mean, he can't really get much flatter because he's set himself such high expectations, and we all expect that from him. So, I mean, considering there's still plenty of time this year, the season's got a wee way to go, and then obviously the World Cup and the qualifiers, everything's in front of us. He's still got time to make a late run and actually play the way that we expect him to. So maybe he's just going through a bit of a flat dip. I don't know, but I mean, all I know is that I picked him to be the best player in the league this year, and he really needs to hurry up if he's going to achieve that. Get some really quick votes in.
Well, one player who's doing really well in the Alex Tobin medal count is Anthony Caceres, and he got on the score sheet again for Sydney in their game against Brisbane. It wasn't enough for them to get the win, though, as Nikolai Mileuznic. He also got one for Brisbane, which meant the game finished 1-1, and Brisbane and Sydney ended up sharing the points. But this was a game that Sydney were expected to win comfortably. Obviously, Sydney being one of the most consistent teams and in the last few years in the A-League, and Brisbane are noticeably weaker this year as well. But yeah, were you surprised by the result, by Sydney's sort of inability to find an extra goal?
Yeah, and I also thought that the other thing I noticed in that game was that there was probably more. Like they usually are very, very clinical in front of goal, Sydney, and I think that there was a lot of moments where you sort of just expected them to score, and they weren't quite as potent as in the past. I mean, Lafondra, I think he had a few opportunities where I would expect him to score once again because I had him as the golden boot, so obviously I'm a little bit disappointed. But can we just talk about the Caceres goal as you know, if you were trying to explain to somebody who just started watching football, what does finesse mean? You know, like the outside of the boot, you know, with a little bit of a whip of the head as he runs past. It just looked great on camera, and it looked great in live speed as well. So you had to appreciate that. It was a lovely ball from Cam Sober as well.
Caceres isn't always the most effective footballer, but there's one thing he has in spades, and that's finesse.
Yeah, he pressed the finesse button on FIFA.
One player who actually was a little bit surprised about how good he was in this game was Macklin Freak. I thought he was probably one of the best players, or one of the most influential players in this game, in that he made a whole bunch of saves, or was very influential in maybe putting a striker off of their attempt on goal as well. So Macklin Freak, I know he's one of Colby's boys, but he's not a player who I'd always looked at and thought, I see a player there. But I tell you what, he was very good against Sydney, I thought.
It's funny too, because like when I've seen that name sort of overseas, it's like Frika is like the sort of way it's said, but here it's just like I feel like I'm back listening to Silverchair and like in the mid 90s. It's like everyone here is just like freak, like great save by freak, and I'm like, whoa, just easy, easy, mate. I mean, he's just a goalkeeper.
Just like the hard rock, like mid-90s guitar in the background.
Yeah, frog stomp going on in the background for Daniel Johns.
Oh, I tell you what. So I was, how old would I have been? About 7 or 8, I think, when that Silverchair album came out. And I remember in primary school, like each of your tables used to have its own. There was like competitions amongst each of the tables, right? And sort of if you did good things, you'd get like a point for your table. And if someone was naughty or whatever, I think they'd take points off. They probably don't take points off for that kind of thing anymore. But anyway, so each table, I think there was 5 or 6 tables in the classroom. And each table could have its own name, and ours was the Freaks because we really liked that Silverchair song as 7-year-olds, right? And
what an homage! What an
homage. Yeah. I'm sure that the primary school teacher was loving that there was a bunch of 7-year-olds calling themselves Freaks. So
we have 7-year-olds who are ironic already. They've already figured out what irony is.
Oh dear. With Sydney playing Brisbane, that was the second time this week that they'd played each other. They played each other in the FFA Cup on Tuesday night. This one was as one-sided as everyone was expecting it to be, with Sydney. They only won 1-0, but it was a pretty one-sided game, with Brisbane sort of struggling really even until they had an extra man advantage after James Donachie was sent off. It does mean that Sydney play Central Coast on Tuesday in the FFA Cup semi-final for a spot in the grand final, while Victory will play the Phoenix at a date to be confirmed. Next up, we're going to talk some Premier League. So first up, I think it'd be a little bit remiss to talk about maybe not necessarily the biggest match, but probably the biggest performance I thought of the weekend, which was that 20 or 30 minutes from Coutinho for Aston Villa, coming on, making his second Premier League debut, this time against Manchester United. And I thought, you know what, you've got to be doing something right if you're able to overshadow Man United's just absolute shit show of a situation at the moment. And Coutinho managed to do that. I thought, we'll go into a little bit more specifics, I guess, about his performance. But first of all, that assist was just chef's kiss. But the goal as well was just was really tidy as well. And I thought it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that performance, because I wouldn't say he did it single-handedly, but it was very influential in getting Villa back into the game after Man United were up. They were already up 2-0, and they looked like they were seeking a third, basically, to kill off the game. So good stuff from Coutinho.
Not slinging like shit directly at Buendia, but you know, that's what I think Villa expected from Buendia when they signed him. Like, basically one of Coutinho's first touches, and you know, he's doing a 1-2, running into the box, quick feet, lays it off, goal. I think that's what they were expecting Buendia to do for them. But and again, like, the reason why I said I'm not slinging shit at him is that I feel like now they can actually really figure out how they want to use Buendia. If Coutinho is going to play that kind of role, then maybe you know, he gets moved out to the right a little bit more, or they sort of alternate. I mean, it's actually a pretty interesting squad now with those two guys playing, because, I mean, really, Coutinho seems to love to drift out to the left and hug that sort of pocket between the midfield and the left wing. Buendia does too, but in saying that, I feel like Buendia is a little more versatile and can play in other areas. So I think
they might actually help each other in getting the best out of each other, because maybe one of the problems has been that everyone expected Buendia to be this hard-running sort of English-style winger, and I think he's actually going to benefit from having maybe someone who's a little bit better technically around him, and someone who wants to play in tight spaces. So it could actually be really great, the two of them playing together, which I think is something that no one was expecting.
Are you saying they could be like a Xavi and Iniesta kind of combination? Is that what you're saying?
Scenes. Just a little bit further up the pitch.
Aston Villa.
That is good. That is very good, Jesse. But look, obviously Villa were good, but something else that sort of came up after the game was finished was Anthony Martial, and Ralph Rangnick. He said that Anthony Martial refused to play in this game. and refused to be in the squad. But Anthony Martial afterwards posted on Instagram saying that he did not and would never refuse to play for Manchester United or will refuse to do something like that. So the situation, I guess, at Manchester United with some of these unhappy players is just going from bad to worse, isn't it?
To be honest, it's kind of surprising hasn't happened earlier. Like for some reason they didn't do this with Ollie, where you kind of there were still problems there, but it seemed that players maybe were just still getting their game time, and even though the system they weren't a fan of the system, they were still getting their minutes, even Martial included at most of the time if he wasn't injured. But now, like, you've got a guy in there who's pretty straight to the point about who he wants to play and who he doesn't want to play. And Martial was clearly one of the first players that he identified as not being helpful to his style of play, and he hasn't taken to it very well at all. And it's getting ugly with some of these players behind. But I guess what I'm saying is that there's so many egos in that team that I suppose most of us are a little bit surprised this hasn't happened earlier. It's just kind of been waiting to ignite.
Well, what they probably would have done if Ole was there, they would have said, "Oh, Anthony Martial, it's okay. We'll just give you a contract extension. We'll increase your pay by 40%, and everything will be okay." And he's gone, "Okay, I don't mind if I'm not playing. If you're going to give me a 40% pay increase," and that's been their approach to everything in the last few years is just like band-aid solutions that just push the can further down the hill.
And ironically, that just creates more toxicity in the squad because those players aren't really playing for the badge. So it's just kind of, you've made your own bed in that situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, back to, I guess, the actual game, though, and Cristiano Ronaldo didn't start in this one, but Bruno Fernandes, he did stand up in the absence of Ronaldo, scored 2 goals. That second goal, he's absolutely fizzed that into the Villa goal. Do you think it's almost like not having to do Ronaldo's doggies means that that Fernandes is actually got the energy to be the player that he's been for the last few years?
I mean, I don't know if you said Fernando's, deliberately there, but I mean, if that's a new chicken joint, I want in. Fernando's peri sauce.
It's very good.
I bet it is. Yeah. No, he does often play well when, I mean, ironically, we're talking about Coutinho like this, but when teams rely on him, he plays well. And we saw that at Sporting before he came to Manchester United. He was by far and away the best player in the team, and they looked to him. Sporting's actually a better team and squad now than when he was there, and the more balanced. But he really excelled being the guy who's on penalties, the guy that everyone looks to create everything. So he carrying the team on his back is not new to Bruno Fernandes, but it's like at Manchester United he kind of had that, and then Ronaldo turns up, and all of a sudden it's not really his team anymore. So we did see a bit of a glimpse, and I think the other thing as well is if you remember, this fixture was quite spicy for him because this is the same fixture in the other way around where Martinez got in his head, and that's when he fizzed the penalty. He fizzed the penalty over the bar. So I think he was playing with a little more motivation than he usually would be, trying to get the ball past Emmy, and he got it past him twice. So I guess he's atoned.
You'll love to see it. Speaking of squad depth and balance, one team with a very balanced, deep squad is Manchester City, and they hosted Chelsea in the primetime game, at least Australian time, on Saturday night. Kevin De Bruyne, as we're now calling him, he struck home with the goal, and very well taken goal, I should say, as well, to give Manchester City the 1-0 victory. And really, I mean, there's not that much to say about this game because even though I watched it in full, there wasn't that much to talk about because Tuchel really set up his Chelsea side just to stifle. And you could say that they were doing a pretty good job at stifling City for big chunks of this game, almost 3/4 of the game. But obviously, Kevin De Bruyne's his class just shone through eventually. But probably this was a game that really there wasn't any mistakes. But if there was one mistake that was made, it was by Jim Beglin calling the Etihad the empty had, and he ended up having to make a full-blown apology on social media about it because, I mean, we all joke about it, but, I mean, the man's professional. Can't be calling it the empty hat.
I mean, the is probably there. He probably has a better view of the seats. I feel like he's probably more qualified than any of us to make that call.
What was worse, the Jim Beglett calling it the empty hat, or those two 7 News reporters talking about Djokovic last week?
Oh, geez. Yeah, that was cringe. No, I think you have to go with the reporters on that one.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing I noticed in this game is, wasn't there a big chance? I mean, Lukaku had a big chance, but there was. Oh no, I'm thinking
You're
about
right.
the City.
No, he was. He was 1-on-1 with Edison. I can't remember if it got called back for offside anyway. But you're right. There was one chance where Lukaku was given a really good chance, and maybe in a less sort of pressurized situation, maybe he might have taken that chance. And if he had had a little bit more game time recently as well. But
and when he tried to pass to Ziyech as well, and Ziyech was offside, and it was a bit of a mess. They made a bit of a meal of that as well. But there was another. I was thinking of a chance. Actually, it was one of the City chances where I think Kovacic gave it away right in front of the goal, and it was actually Kepa who made a good save to save their bacon. But yeah, I mean, with De Bruyne, he just annoys me because you can't help but love the player. Like, he's just such an extraordinary player that, regardless if he's wearing a Man City shirt, you just have to appreciate how amazing he is. But really pisses me off when he scores like a decisive winner. Like, he did the same thing away at Chelsea a year or two ago where he just scored an absolute screamer. And there's something about him when he gets angry as well, because he doesn't get angry very often. But you'll see in the lead up to that goal that somebody put their studs down the back of him, and he's like, all right, I'll be having this. And occasionally he just lets rip when he's just sick. Like, he does so much creating. I think that sometimes he's just like, all right, I'm just going to take this with my own hands and see what we can do. And usually he's pretty lethal.
It's like it's the opposite of, those players, they lose their head after that, like they cop a bad tackle or something like that, and they just start shooting from like all sorts of terrible places, and they take shots from bad places. They start doing bad tackles and stuff like that. But De Bruyne doesn't. He just starts scoring bangers.
Yeah, he does. It almost improves his concentration.
Yeah. But look, a stat for you: City are now 13 points clear of Chelsea in third place. Chelsea, though, are 6 points clear of West Ham in fourth. So Chelsea are in a bit of a weird sort of limbo zone now. It's not really that much difference between second and third in terms of sort of prestige or even Champions League these days. So there's not really. They can't win the title now, conceivably, but it's very unlikely that they would even finish fourth now, I think. And fourth seems to be a bit of a three or maybe even a four-way race between West Ham, Spurs, Arsenal, and maybe Manchester United as well. But Chelsea's season now, it looks like it's pretty much Champions League or bust, which is a weird place to be in. Next up.
Yeah. I think it is. And I think, we have to get George on for some Chelsea corner soon and pick his brains and see how he felt about that performance.
Next up, Norwich. They hosted Everton. This one we've kind of already mentioned already was the game that led to Rafa Benitez getting sacked after Norwich beat Everton 2-1. Norwich are just 1 point away from safety now, which is massive for them. Anything else you wanted to talk about this game, mate? It's not really that much I was going to say.
We just got to put a bit of respect on Dean Smith. I mean, like, he's come in and he's there's still plenty of time left in the season. And as you mentioned, they're digging their way out. Maybe that canary will get out of the coal mine.
And I tell you what, like, I know we had all pretty much written off Norwich a couple of weeks ago, and look, they were terrible against West Ham, I've got to say, even last week. And but having said that, though, if Norwich are able to stay up, I think that is an enormous. It should deserve. Dean Smith, I think, would deserve to be manager of the year if he keeps Norwich up, because I think that's a massive achievement, especially considering their team is worse than last time they were in the Premier League 2 years ago. So
it's interesting with these teams too, because I think that what we all support teams that genuinely have a squad that can play pretty consistently through a whole season. But I think especially when it comes to the relegation race, you just see these teams that go out and play an absolute shocking, like basically that they're just in damage limitation, shocking game. Next week they play against a relegation rival and they just have like this extra 50% of energy and they just go for it. And then the next week they just get run over. But it's like they've just accepted that in those games against the bigger teams, they're going to get run over, and they don't expend too much energy, and they don't try and do too much, and then they just go after the ones around them. So you might be starting to see a little bit of that from Norwich. I mean, they might have a really poor performance one week, but, then all of a sudden they do that to Everton. So it's...
Yeah, and I mean, like inconsistency is one thing, but I think you're picking up on something that that Watford have actually done pretty well, which is they are very selective at the games that they go. All right, we think we're in with a chance here, and you see some weeks you can tell that when they go out there, they're thinking we don't really have a shot at this, so we're not going to expend a lot of mental or physical energy in trying to win it. But one game that Watford did think that they were a chance in was when they travelled to Newcastle in a real relegation 6-pointer. Watford's late equaliser that stopped Eddie Howe from getting his first victory as Newcastle boss after they went up early through Alan St-Maximin. One thing I did love about this was Watford, their social media team posted João Pedro's equaliser on their social media, as you would expect they would. And at the very end of it, they showed Eddie Howe just crossed-armed, just obviously very unimpressed afterwards. And I actually I saw that before I caught the full highlights on the Sunday. And I noticed that like Eddie Howe's reaction is not in the Premier League highlights. It's like Watford had done that specifically to show Eddie Howe just like frowning on the Newcastle bench, which I thought that was a very nice bit of like a little bit of video editing, I thought.
Wow.
But look, it was Kieran Trippier's his second Premier League debut as well for this time for Newcastle, and he'd be very disappointed again. No clean sheet, unable to get a win after Newcastle lost in the FA Cup. I think it was midweek or last weekend. One thing I just don't understand is obviously Newcastle bought Kieran Trippier. It's maybe a pretty decent purchase. He's English. He knows the Premier League. He's got a great set piece delivery as well. And so with Chris Wood, you can see what the plan is there. But I mean, in that whole back line, the fullback is the position that they're probably strongest out of. It's centre back that they need new players at, and I know that they've been linked with a lot of different players, but Newcastle been linked with Atalanta's left back Robin Gosens, the German bloke who a lot of people would remember from the Euro. So just really bizarre that I mean maybe it's just agent talk, but just really bizarre that they're still being linked with fullbacks.
Or maybe they just want to push Matt Ritchie further up the pitch. Push that wand a little further up the pitch.
A little bit of extra magic was served up in Wolves versus Southampton. Connor Cody, he got a rare goal for Wolves as they continue to do bits. They got a 3-1 win at home against Southampton. Wolves remain in 8th, and they look very comfortable at the moment. We've talked about that James Ward-Prowse free kick earlier on with the commentary bit as well. But wowie, that free kick that was something special because it was from a long way out as well. Like that's pretty close to being 40 yards out, which you just don't see people scoring from that sort of range.
No, you don't. But I guess we had a quick chat about this the other day, and I just think that. I think you mentioned you need the audacity to go for it. And I think that what I loved about it is that there are so many players at the top level of the game who have the ability to hit a ball similar to that, not probably as accurate as that, but they just don't have the balls to do it. They just don't have the balls to step up and be like, I'm going to have this. And Ward-Prowse, talisman of the team, he's just done so many great free kicks over the years. And I think he even fooled the commentators and the goalkeeper, because as we know, his specialty is to wrap his foot around it. So goalkeeper, you notice that the goalkeeper actually moved that way, expecting the ball to go that way, and the ball did go that way, and then it swerved back the other way. It was absolutely insane.
And that's why. So what it reminded me of was maybe from a different era, but it reminded me of the Jabulani from I think it was the 2010 World Cup. And remember how everyone was sort of complaining about it at the time, that the ball was a bit unpredictable and it'd sort of start to swerve one way, then it'd go back a different direction. But that's what it was like. It looked like it was starting to go from right to left, and then it just spears off and goes in, like left to right. And would have been very, very difficult to keep that one out. I think even if he was looking to go to the top right hand corner.
People still froth that Ronaldo free kick against Portsmouth, I think it was, and like this was a very similar strike. It started sort of central, and then it was an outswinger.
Well, except it was that James Ward-Prowse effort was, I think, probably about another 10 yards further out though.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Inject.
Sam Ellis, he asks, where does James Ward-Prowse rate in all-time Premier League free kick takers? He's got to be up there, doesn't he?
I feel like in recent years he's become so much more lethal, though. Like, he's always been good at free kicks, but I feel like I used to always associate him with being able to put the ball on an absolute dime. Like, he's so good at whipping the ball in for centre backs to score. And over the years, I think he's been a really big provider from set pieces for the Saints. But in the last few seasons, he's one of the players you fear the most once you get to a certain close point near the box. He isn't phased as much as other players about getting it up over the wall. He backs himself to do that every time and get it down to just dip. So that's what makes him so lethal. He just has so much confidence in his ability.
Like normally you might see a player, they get to this point, whether it's in the Premier League or anywhere, they get to this point where you feel that they master free kicks sort of around the penalty area, and you can see this sort of confidence where they just feel like that they know that they can put it sort of a top corner or maybe even bottom corner if they can get enough on it. And James Ward-Prowse he looks like he's at that point already, but he's only 27. He could still be doing this for another 5 years.
I mean, I can understand that because, I'm 33. And when we went to the park, before Christmas, we put a wheelie bin in front of the posts. And, I was just whipping James Ward-Prowse free kicks over that wheelie bin. So, I mean, I certainly felt that moment that I'd mastered free kicks. But,
Jesse Ward-Prowse. Moving on though, so Burnley against Leicester, that was postponed quite late on, so unfortunately that one will have to get rescheduled. But there was two matches that were played on Sunday night. Both Jesse and my teams respectively both played. Pretty routine 3-0 win for Liverpool, I've got to say, despite being without Salah, Mane and others. Goals from Fabinho, Oxlade-Chamberlain and Minamino gave Liverpool the win over Brentford. Pretty great for Liverpool to get all 3 points on the back of not having some of their best players, Jesse.
Yeah, and just so many boxes ticked in a routine Liverpool home performance. Lots of scares where we just slip defensively and teams, almost score, but somehow just miss at Anfield. And then us missing and being quite wasteful as well, but still getting 3 goals. Sometimes we have a lot of shots, don't score many. But I think that's a good problem to have, considering that our best goal scorers are away. And the biggest concern Liverpool fans at the moment is not being able to actually create things. We certainly struggled against Arsenal in the Cup. So I think people will be quite relieved that we did create a lot and got the job done.
Very good.
But heading over to London Stadium.
Yeah, so West Ham, they hosted Leeds United in a game that I think probably a lot of West Ham fans would have thought, they played them in the FA Cup midweek as well, so they got the win there, but it wasn't to be, and West Ham looked like they struggled a little bit here with, so particularly Diop, he struggled with the Leeds attacking front three of Harrison, Rafinha and Dan James. But it was Jack Harrison. He was the one that stole all the headlines. Unbelievably, he scored a hat-trick as he put West Ham to the sword. And it was a Leeds side that were missing a whole bunch of senior players as well. And despite none of them being out through COVID, it was quite conceivable that Leeds probably could have requested that the game be postponed and they would have actually been able to successfully do so. But pretty impressive win for Leeds, who haven't had any of their games postponed so far. One thing I did think was pretty interesting out of this game was Leeds actually got a 4th goal, but it was disallowed after, I think it was I can't remember his name, the Polish midfielder with Click. Yep, Matthias Click. He was basically, the ball was going in. He'd beaten Fabianski, and Click was on the goal line, and it brushed him. And because he was in an offside position, Mike Dean ended up disallowing the goal. And you suspect that some referees would have been like, "Oh, look, I'm sorry. I know this had no impact at all on the actual goal being scored, but well, he was offside, so I'm sorry, but I have to do it." You just know that Mike Dean would have taken great pleasure in absolutely just ruling this out and being like, "Rules is rules."
Yeah, just real Grinch areas.
Exactly. Bit of a, like I said, disappointing result for West Ham, but very handy win for Leeds. It does mean that West Ham are only 2 points ahead of Arsenal, who do have 2 games in hand. And then you've got Spurs, who have 4 games in hand on West Ham and are only, 4 points behind West Ham. So it seems pretty unlikely that West Ham are going to hold on to 4th place in the short term, but obviously it's still a long season. As far as Leeds go, they're with the win, they're up to clear 15th. They're clear of Everton, and they're looking a little bit more comfortable now than maybe they were just a week or so ago. They're now 9 points clear of Norwich, who are the top placed in the relegation zone at the moment. The other game that was postponed, not cancelled, was the North London derby, which was one that we were meant to be talking about in a bit more detail tonight, but that ended up being postponed. Not clear exactly how many. Actually, sorry, before we do that, and I do hate going back on this. Akazonis, he asked me specifically, should Jared Bowen, the West Ham winger, should he be the face of Chesty Bond? And and I hate to double back, but that was a fantastic question, because I thought that's actually a really good shout. Apparently, Jared Bowen is dating one of the what's it called, Love Island, one of the really prominent people off of Love Island from over there. Was her name Danny Dyer? And so all of the West Ham fans, they've really gotten around the fact that Jared Bowen has just turned into an absolute force of nature in the past sort of 6 weeks since he started dating Danny Dyer. And just the double D's and Danny Dyer just mean that you can just imagine the West Ham fans, they have really doubled down on Danny Dyer songs.
Down, Danny Dyer, Dildo Brothers. It's all just one big, dare I say it, orgy. But happy for the bloke. I mean, he's just living his best life.
Oh wow! As I was saying, though, North London derby was postponed, and Didi Hamann, the ex-Liverpool midfielder from the early 2000s, he made a really great point, I thought, on social media, which was that so Bayern Munich, they had a full bench of players who did not have a single Bundesliga appearance, yet still managed to turn out an 11, whereas Premier League clubs have squads of up to 60 players and call games off on a weekly basis. What is the point of these young players? And Akazonis, he asks as well, why do some teams insist on not playing football? They have enormous squads, plus under 23s, players on loan, and they can't play. So, look, it's a bit of a farce, I think, and I think everyone thinks that the North London derby didn't end up going ahead. You got anything else that you'd like to add on, I guess, this whole basket case of a situation regarding cancellations, postponements?
I think that the hardest thing about it is like trying to come back to a world where things are fair, because that's, like you mentioned before about Leeds not having many, postponements or having an opportunity to take 2, whereas other teams have certainly taken advantage of the situation, as you'd expect some teams to. It's just kind of, we're now at a point where like it isn't fair. There are teams that are suffering more than others. Are teams that are upholding, I guess you could say a little bit of honor, and other teams that are just taking the piss. It doesn't matter who you support, and if you are one of those teams, it's still at a point now where everything is just such high stakes in the Premier League. And what we're seeing is that the desperation to ensure that they've got the strongest squad possible to face each other. I mean, especially the relegation games that you're seeing at the moment. I mean, some of the chat around Dennis staying in for Watford and not going to the Africa Cup of Nations, a lot of it was made up about the coach, and but here's a guy who's broken through and is absolutely killing it for Watford, and he's in the top division. And Watford have said, well, we're going to need you. I mean, if I think it was maybe Damo mentioned last week or someone who said that, what if Watford's next few games while the Africa Cup of Nations run with Chelsea, Liverpool and City? Would Watford be so desperate to hold on to Dennis then? Like, I think that what you're seeing is these squads are desperate to field their best team, desperate to win every single week and get the most points they can. And it's kind of unfortunate to see the ugly side of that. In Germany, well, I mean, Bayern Munich's a juggernaut, so I'm not sure if they're the greatest example. I mean, their bench probably still as good as most teams in the Bundesliga. So because they poach all the players, they poach all the players, don't they?
Bastards, Munich.
Absolute pirates. That's what they are. Yeah.
They are. Wow. All right. I think that's probably a good note to wrap up on then, on Bastards Munich. But it's been a lot of fun talking football with you, Jesse. It's been great having the listeners along for the ride. Thanks to all the contributors as well for providing us with us questions on social media. Previously in the past, we've asked if you could give us a review on Apple Podcasts, whatever you're listening to. But I note now that Spotify, you're able to do reviews on Spotify for podcasts as well. So if you listen to us on Spotify, or you listen to it, or you listen to anything on Spotify, please jump on and give us a review if you like listening to us. If you don't like listening to us, don't give us a review though, because we need all the positive feedback we can get. So, but look, that's it for this week. And until next week, enjoy the football.